soon as we've got that. And then we'll do a sound check real quick once you start up too. Check, yeah. All right. Any requests? Anything? Yeah, we'll have a sing-along here, karaoke night.
I'll do my 1.5 hulas.
Ham and cheese, please.
On rye? Well, of course. Sourdough. That's one of the students that does work with Falk's telescope. And his brother there also.
Until he's bent.
Yes. And number of our students working with Falk's are here.
They won't learn anything from this talk.
Yes, they will. Just different things.
That's right.
All right. And Hayden will let us know when he's ready.
By the way, I'm going to keep you out after as much time as it takes to set up. So I hope you don't
Yes.
leave right away.
Apologize for the delays.
It's okay.
Thank you. All right. Anyone seen any good movies lately? I've heard that's really good.
That is good.
Yeah, I have.
Should we tell you who shows up, or do you want us to keep that?
No, I have not seen it. No spoilers.
Okay.
We're good upstairs. So Hayden,
I saw the IRS Star Trek video.
I don't even want to know.
Classic.
So when Hayden is ready, he will. Hayden? Oh, okay. And they're saying that we're good upstairs, so thank you upstairs. We will get going. Hayden's just got one or two more tweaks that he wants to do.
So if I talk to upstairs, do I have to look up?
Yeah. But make sure that you know. Yeah, make sure that you know that you're talking to upstairs and not,
I'll talk about that. Look, I drove them out already.
All right. Yes, people are leaving earlier than I thought.
I haven't even got to my Reagan joke yet.
I thought Reagan was a joke. Oh, sorry.
I would like you to remind you that he said that.
Actually, I'm a fan of Reagan. Oh, that's even worse, isn't it?
Reagan's
Yep. Okay, we're good back there? All right. Well, welcome to the Institute for Astronomy, whether you're here live or virtually. I'm Dr. J.D. Armstrong. I'm the Maui Technology, Education, and Outreach Specialist. One of the things I get to do is put together these talks and invite fascinating speakers like Dr. Paul Coleman over to give these talks every month. Before I introduce the speaker, I do want to make a bit of an announcement. The Maui Astronomy Club has reserved the Falk's Telescope for tomorrow night. We will have a live stream broadcast if you are interested in watching that. Or better yet, why don't you just come up here and join us, and maybe you can be one of the people controlling a 2-meter class telescope at the summit of Haleakala. Good enough, Becky?
What time?
What time?
8 to 9:50.
8 to 9:50. So we actually have the telescope at 8 o'clock till 9:50. So we'll start a little bit earlier than that. And so now to introduce Dr. Paul Coleman. He's from the Institute for Astronomy over on Oahu. I always ask the speakers how they would like to be introduced, and the first thing that Paul said is that he wants to be introduced as a local boy. You know, he's from Hawaii, grew up here, spent some time on the mainland, came back, grew up here. He got his undergraduate degree at Notre Dame. He went there to play football, actually, but apparently some of the guys were too big and too rough, and so he went and decided that physics was where his real interest was at. He didn't actually get into astronomy until he taught an astronomy class over at Virginia Tech. His career bounces around. He was at NRAO, the National Radio Astronomical Observatory, and got his PhD from, was it Virginia Tech actually, or it was from
Pittsburgh.
University of Pittsburgh, thank you. As everyone knows, I have to screw up at least once during my introduction, right? Listen, I might screw up again. Then he went to the Netherlands, to the University of New Mexico, Yale, Puerto Rico, and finally made his way back to Hawaii, where he's been since then. His interest in research is in nonlinear processes, nonlinear dynamics in physics and astronomy. And he is also, since we started off with Falk's Telescope, he's the project scientist on the Falk's Telescope North. So let's give him a nice Maui welcome for Dr. Paul Coleman.
Thank you, JD, for that almost perfect introduction.
Yeah.
He mentioned that I'm the Fox Telescope project scientist, but he does all the work. So if I get any glory, it's because of the work he's done.
Well, thank you. And we'll check the sound real quick with Hayden, make sure it is all right.
Is that okay?
Hayden?
Yeah, sounds
It's okay? And you guys in the back, you can hear me too? Do I have to? I'll speak a little louder. I'll use my command voice.
Use your outdoor voice.
My daughters hate this voice. Okay. So as JD mentioned, I've sort of been around a little bit. So today I wanted to talk to you about something perhaps not so much astronomical as just sort of social. So there'll be a lot of jokes. I had like 150 slides and I had to pare it down. So we might run into a little overtime, but I'll try to keep the jokes to at least the ones that you'll laugh about. Here's a typical Hawaiian. Typical. And here's a typical astronomer. My daughters say that I look like the one on your right, and if I face a certain way, my daughter, when she was 4 years old, she said, "Daddy, why do they have pictures of you in all these stores? And where did you put your little hat?" So, but they say that I look like the one on the right, but I often act like the one on the left. So, let's start with the one on the left. How many of you are astronomers? A few, right? And not amateurs. Sorry, I have to apologize to the amateurs because I'm gonna discuss professional astronomers. Although we have a really good contingent of amateurs on this island.
Well, I'm a physicist.
And physicists, you're with me. We can stay together. But so the point is, there's a very small percentage of you who know what an astronomer is. Okay. Some of you know just because you've been infected with the bug. And I don't want to talk about amateur astronomers, although they form a very important function in our lives, professional astronomers' lives. But I can't really discuss what pathetic thing went wrong in their life that they now are doing astronomy. It's either is it nurture or nature? I don't know. Were they born crazy or did they just become crazy? I don't know. But at least my excuse is I get paid to do this craziness. So anyway, by the way, this is John Pye, so he's kind of a professional sneaking in there as well. So I won't be talking about this kind of astronomers, but I'd like you to have a little insight into the kinds of astronomers that you may see running around this building and why they're so snooty. Okay. First of all, how do you make an astrophysicist? In some parts of Hawaii, that's the same as how do you build a monster, because after all we do is desecrate, sacred places, right? Not that we mean to, but we do. And I'll show you that that's probably an incorrect point of view. First of all, there's training. Horrible training. You have to go to high school. You have to be interested in science. You have to take science. The more advanced placement you can do, the better for you as a high school student. The more math you take, the better for you in terms of your scientific career. But after high school, of course, you go on to college. And you have to get a BS. Okay? You have to get a Bachelor of Science. If you get a Bachelor of Arts, it's going to be much harder for you to become an astronomer. Okay? You need the Bachelor of Science because it's considered the tougher degree. Okay? The arts degree is not considered to be so tough. And you're going to have to convince people at the next level that you're worth them taking on. Also, you want to major in physics, astrophysics, math, or chemistry, not astronomy, because astronomy is considered a fluff degree. So you want to take hard things, physics, chemistry, math, stuff where you can show that you can handle the rigor of difficult calculations or difficult research. Okay, so when you're all done and you have your Bachelor of Science, there are many colleges and universities that will allow you to get this level of rigor. University of Hawaii Manoa does it. Also here at University of Hawaii Hilo, and Maui College may someday be able to offer this kind of degree. All right, so when you're done with that, you have to have typically a B average or better, and you have to do very well in the graduate record exams. It's like a SAT or PSAT exam that you take when you're done with college. And it shows everybody that you can compete with people nationally. If you're lucky, you will be admitted into graduate school. And here's where the pain sort of stops and begins. It's kind of complicated. It stops because you are paid to go to school. Okay? Kids love this. You mean when I'm done with college, I get paid? Yes, you get paid. It's a small, measly little stipend, but you still get paid to go to school. Your pay is given to you in a form of teacher support. Either you TA for a course or you do a little research assistantship, but you are paid for your graduate program. And this is where you're different from every lawyer and every doctor that you will ever meet, because of course they still pay for law school and doctor school, medical school. But the problem is, yin and yang, it's going to come back to get you in the end, because they make a lot more money than they do when they're all done with their school. They pay off their debts and then they're making money and you're not. So you have to really enjoy science. You have to it has to be something that you're not doing it because you want to make money, because you aren't going to make money. Sorry to burst that bubble for you. There's long hours, of course. You get to go to exotic locations, and there's, of course, poor health benefits, and the jobs typically are not so good as a grad student, and you're limited until you get your PhD. So at some point, the thing that every graduate student goes through is deciding when to graduate, right? I think that happens when you realize that you can get paid 4 times as much for doing the same work than you graduate, get your PhD. But then there's a problem. It's called survival. You may think you're going to get paid 4 times as much by getting your degree. But you got to get a job. And the last time I checked this statistic, within 10 years of receiving their doctorates, 35% of the people who now are Dr. so-and-so quit because they can't find a job. So you have to be also very stubborn. You have to be sure that you are going to do well, because you have to be sure of yourself, confident. But 45% will go on to jobs that are potentially permanent, but 20% are going to be living in limbo for the rest of their lives, because they're going to have to write grants and get support, and they may not get support. So that there's always that extra feature. This is 10 years after high school. Okay? Imagine you work for 10 years, you're 18 years old, and you work till you're 28, and then you say, well, I can't really do that, and you go and do something else. Okay? That's what you have to look forward to. Now, fortunately, when I was in high school, nobody told me this, so I blithely just kept going, right? You keep going. And then when you're done with your doctorate, you're now a doctor, whoever you are, and then you're assigned a bunch of little jobs, postdocs. They usually last 2 to 3 years, and they're there just so that you can establish yourself as a scientist. And people will say, oh, I like him, let's hire him, let's try to get him to come here. Okay, so typically you have 2 or 3 of them. If you're a real hotshot, you don't get any postdocs, you go straight into the next layer. But most people are not that way. And usually most people are 2 or 3 postdocs. And so now we're talking about a good 16 years out of high school. So you talk to a senior who's 18, mind you, and you say, you're going to work for the next 16 years before you can even apply for a permanent job. Okay? You think, how many of those 18-year-olds do you think are going to actually take this, oh, I'll go for that job, yeah. And even then, you're only 45% sure you're going to be it. But when you get to this level, after having postdocs and you're now a well-known name, you're a commodity, people know of you, at least some people do, you can go to be a support scientist, like you work for the Keck telescope or Gemini or something like that. You can be a tenure-track professor like me, where you're actually at a university teaching and or research. And then, or you can go soft money, that route. And the soft money route is, again, you write a grant proposal, and if you get the grant, then you continue to survive. If not, you drive a cab or something like that. But the point is, for you to get to this level, that's of course taken 16 years, and when you get to the tenure track level, it takes another 3 to 6 years for tenure review to the point where you're finally going to have a permanent job. If you fail your tenure review, then you're out. You're kicked out after 6 years. So in reality, what this all means is that 22 years after high school, you'll finally have a permanent job on average. Talk to an 18-year-old and say, now you're going to work for more than you've been alive, and you still may not get a permanent job. Okay? So it takes real confidence, real assurance that this is what you want to do to be an astronomer. Now you know why every astronomer that, most of the PhD astronomers walking around are so, snooty. Oh, don't bother me with the benign details. It's because they went through this. Okay? Some maybe a little less, some maybe more. Okay? So we have a self-important point of view. We've got an inflated ego because we survive this stuff. Okay? All right, so that's the astronomer side. That's what you have to do to be an astronomer, a modern astronomer, a modern paid astronomer in today's world. What makes a person Hawaiian? Okay, how many Hawaiians in this crowd? Any? One? Come on.
Raised a Filipino family.
Maybe, I don't know. Okay, we'll have to, I will address almost all of those features. Watch this. So maybe one. Look at this. One person, too. Me and you. Okay. So what makes a person Hawaiian? Resident of Hawaii. Nah, not the same as Californian. I'm a Californian. Everybody knows what that means, right? I live in California. I'm a Hawaiian. Well, that's something a little bit meatier, right? Okay, so it's not that. How about aloha? I have aloha spirit. I drive with aloha. I don't run over the little ladies in the crosswalk, right? Some people do. We hear about it all the time. It's not that either because, look, this is the 5th annual Live Aloha Festival, right? It's held in Seattle. Okay? Now, clearly, there are some Hawaiians involved. Yeah, who's from Seattle? No. Clearly, there's some Hawaiians involved in this, but most of the people who partake in this Aloha Festival are from all over the place, right? They're not Hawaiian. Okay, so it's not aloha. How about hula? Well, need I say more? This is a Japanese hula troupe which competed in the Merry Monarch Festival. Okay, none of these dancers are Hawaiian. Okay, I know no hulas. I tried as a young man to learn 2 because you have to learn 2. 1 to do it, and then when they say hana ho, you do it different. Right? Everybody knows about that. Okay, that's the rule. Okay, not me. How about olelo Hawaii? Now I can understand 70% of Hawaiian language. Okay, do I have to know Hawaiian language to be a Hawaiian? Well, no. Okay, and I'll show you with this simple example. These are 3 master navigators from Hawaii, these 3 guys. This is Papa Mau, who taught Nainoa Thompson the old methods of navigation. Okay, of these 3 guys, this is Shorty Bergelman, this is Nainoa, and this is Kalepa Baibayan. But of these 3 guys, only Kalepa is fluent in Hawaiian. But I would never go up to Nainoa and say, you must not be Hawaiian, boy, you don't speak Hawaiian. Okay. By the way, Kalepa is a Maui kid, Lahaina boy. And I met him when I was a teenager. We played together, and then long story. So, obviously, knowing the Hawaiian language is not required, okay, to be Hawaiian. How about ohana? Have a strong sense of family, right? Hawaiians have a very strong sense of family, but there are other people who do. Now, I can't show this to just everybody because young kids don't understand this, right? So you're showing your age by laughing. Okay, that's right. It's a great movie. It's an Oscar-winning movie, so you could get away with it by saying, I'm just a movie buff. But this, of course, is the Corleone family, right? But, okay, so here, we can even go a little bit closer, and then there's the Ewing family. But to really get the modern kids today, you got to show this family. Okay, and this is an example of a very diverse family, modern family, who stick together, take care of each other in much the same way that Hawaiians in their ohana concept take care of each other. All right, so that, well, we know it's not ohana. So how about ties to the aina? Okay, we love the land, we take care of it. In Hawaiian tradition, it's our uncle or auntie, right? It's the land is in our family. Okay? But that's not true. Lots of other different, and I just gave a bunch of quotes of indigenous people and their concept of the land. And most of it is wildly different from the European concept that it's something to be traded or bought or fought over. Okay? So no, it can't be our respect for the Aina. Okay? Besides, Hawaiians, we're ocean people. So, how about respect for kupuna? Okay, we all deeply respect our elders. Hawaiians had to respect the elders because the elders were the source of knowledge. Okay, an elder would transmit the knowledge to their grandchild, and that's how knowledge was passed from generation to generation in Hawaii. Now we don't really have quite so strong a thing, but you can see there are many cultures who revere the old guys, right? In fact, there's some places that revere guys who die. You know, they're long dead, right? And in fact, as they get older, we revere them more, even though they're not saying much anymore. So, oh, sorry. That was my Ronald Reagan joke for JD. Okay, so how about Polynesian? Polynesian, we all speak the same language. We look kind of the same, you know, maybe that's it. And the answer is no, that can't be it. So here's 3 different Polynesian groups. Can you pick the Hawaiian group out of this? The answer is no, you can't, because there's no Hawaiian group in this. This is Tahitians, Samoans, and Tongans. Okay? But we all look alike, but none of these are Hawaiian. You know, they wouldn't call themselves Hawaiian either. Okay? Why? Well, because to be Hawaiian, you have to have the blood. Okay? What does that mean? It means I have Hawaiian blood in me. What does that mean? Well, it means that I'm the son of someone who had Hawaiian blood. And so forth and so forth and so forth. And I'll tell you in a second where those so forths end off. But before I do that, I wanted to get this birther thing right now, okay? Because it's not only Obama who's been plagued by the birther thing. I have my own, and while it's not Donald Trump who was my my birther guy, it was someone who could very easily be morphed from Donald Trump. Now, I'm not going to tell you who this is. If you know Hilo, you will know him. But I once applied for a job in Hilo, I didn't apply for a job. My name was just brought up in casual conversation. And this guy said, oh, yeah, that Paul Coleman, he claims he's Hawaiian. Okay? So I would like to put this to rest, and I will show you the long form of my birth certificate. Okay? Now, anyway. This is a typical short form. Of course, it belongs to Barack Obama, but you can get this on the web, by the way. So you notice it's just got some small things like his mother's race, father's race, names, things like that. Just a few small details, not a whole lot of real complicated detail. But this is what the long form looks like. First thing you'll notice is this is a very special long form because it was the territory of Hawaii was when I was born. Hawaii wasn't even a state then. So you now know that I'm like old as dirt, right? So it also gives you a little hint to my whole personality because this means that at a young age I was told I could never be the President of the United States because I wasn't born in the United States. Okay? I was born in a territory of the United States. Which back then the rule was you had to be born in the United States. So unlike Barack Obama, who could go on to become President of the United States, I couldn't. I was very bitter. Very, very bitter. I mean, this crushed my spirit as a youngster. The other thing you'll notice is that under race of father it says Caucasian. Under race of mother it says Hawaiian Caucasian. There it is. Proof that I'm Hawaiian. Okay? And if you go and look at my mother's birth certificate, it says father Hawaiian, mother Hawaiian, or Hawaiian Caucasian. And it says my mom, Hawaiian Caucasian. So again, that's the blood, right? Where do you get that blood from? Seems like an easy thing to do. Go get a transfusion, no problem. No, that's not what we see. But I wanted to show you another detail about birth certificates, okay? And let me go back just in case. The real thing is to look at the back of a birth certificate. This is where the birthers are losing their chance. Okay? You will never get a copy of the back of a birth certificate. Go down and ask them for it. They can't give it to you. It takes like a court order to do it. Why? Because on the back of a birth certificate, there sometimes is a seal here with a judge's signature under it. That means the child was adopted. Okay? So any child can request a birth certificate, but they can't know that they're adopted unless they can, give legal right or legal cause to do that. So the birthers miss their chance. They should be saying, "We want to see the back of your long form." Now, I don't want to hear about this, 2 weeks from now, where people are, saying, "Show us the back of your birth certificate." So anyway, this is now you know the whole terrible story about the birth certificate problem. Okay, so Hawaiian, when I was little, there was a stereotype that they're all fat and lazy. No way. My uncle was a doctor. In fact, he was my personal doctor until he retired. My other uncle, all the Hawaiian men in my family, my other uncle ran a farm in Makaha. He had pigs. We would go to his house and he would do luau's for our family. Okay. My grandfather was an Olympic swimmer. Okay. He was in the 1924 Olympics, the one that they did Chariots of Fire, that movie about. He was a backstroker. Okay. So in my family, the Hawaiians were not fat, lazy people. They were people who actually went and did things. Okay. So I have a feeling that I would probably let them down with my fat and lazy attitudes. But anyway, so they're not. In fact, we have it on good authority that Hawaiians are astronomers. Okay. Why do I say this? Well, here's the authority. This was written in the start of one of Liliuokalani's books, where she writes, "The ancient Hawaiians were astronomers." End of quotation. Not some were, all of them. Okay, every ancient Hawaiian was an astronomer. Now, we use ancient in a different way, those of us in our modern world, than she did. When she did it, she was talking about 1,000 years before. She wasn't talking about just 100 years. And look at us. Let's see if I have it. How ancient is ancient? You hear this all the time. Oh, the ancient Hawaiians did this or did that or blah, blah, blah. That's not so ancient. Look. The Hawaiian Kingdom started just a little bit after America became independent. We don't call George Washington an ancient American, right? So it's a disservice to say that the old Hawaiian ways are ancient Hawaiian ways. They're old Hawaiian ways. It's true that the Hawaiian culture was around for 1,000, 2,000 years before that. Yeah, that's true too. But we tend to minimalize, what's going on in Hawaiian society because we say, oh, that was ancient. That was a long time ago. It really wasn't. My grandmother was born right here. My tutu was born just after the Hawaiian Kingdom days were over. But her mother, whom I talked to many times up until I was 14, was an adult during the Hawaiian Kingdom days. Okay, so it's not that far removed from us. Okay, so don't say ancient. If you want to learn anything or get anything out of this talk, always say the Hawaiians of old or the pre-contact Hawaiians. Okay. All right, so why do we believe Hawaiians have to be astronomers? What's that all about? Well, to really see that, let's just do a little looking at the world. Here's what the world looks like, the so-called Polynesian Triangle. Okay. All throughout this area, when Cook went traveling around, he was amazed at all these same-looking people, brown, tall, smiled a lot, spoke this language that he didn't understand. And the language seemed about the same throughout. So he thought that this would be one of the biggest nations on Earth, filled with the same people spread out throughout the Polynesian Triangle. It's not really a triangle because it's got all these sort of side things sticking out to the side of it. But up at the northern corner is Hawaii. Okay, so if you look at just Hawaii again, I've drawn a circle around Hawaii that's 2,000 miles in radius. Okay, what that means is if you're sitting in Hawaii, you have to go 2,000 miles before you hit another bit of land. Okay, 2,000 miles on a canoe, it takes 30 days about, okay, almost a full month to do. Okay. This yellow dot that I've drawn here is how far, if you were sitting in the center of that yellow dot, that's how far you can see. So if this was a canoe with people, they would not see Hawaii. They would not see Mauna Kea. They would not see Haleakala because it's too far away. So I want to just impress upon you the enormity of finding these islands in a canoe. Okay, you got to be able to figure it out, right? How can you do that? Well, given the fact that every day, every direction you look, when you get about 50 miles away from an island, this is what it looks like in every direction all day long. Okay? Fortunately, if you're an astronomer, at night, the sky is filled with signs that point in the direction that you need to go. It's incredible. I mean, I know you guys can all see the sign, right? You can see the sign, right? Right? You guys all saw this sign, right? This sign over here, right? This thing that's called Orion. That's called the Big Dipper, right? That's the sign you guys saw, right? And you know that the pointer stars on the Big Dipper points to the North Star. And so it's always up in the sky. Part of the time it's not, but you can find it if you know the sky. Okay? There's signs up there. It's easy to do. Hawaiians had to know astronomy in order to get here in the first place. Impossible to get here if you don't know astronomy. You cannot, unless you have a compass, of course. We don't have metals on these low volcanic islands. You know, I always wondered why, as a young man, why Hawaiians never got out of the Stone Age. There's no metal. How can you get out of a Stone Age if there's nothing but stone, right? All right, so let's see what's next. What's next is it's not working anymore. Oh. So here's my perspective on Hawaiians and astronomers. Every Hawaiian who is alive today has Hawaiian blood in them. The only reason they have is because their parents had Hawaiian blood, and on and on and on and on, back until someone of their ancestors got off a canoe that had just finished a 30-day voyage from the South Pacific. That's the only way you get to be Hawaiian. If you're Hana'id, that still means that the family you're Hana'id into, someone in that family, you trace it back, they were in a canoe and they came from the South Pacific. That's what Hawaiian is. Okay? Tahitians, Samoans, Tongans, they can't say that. But every Hawaiian who's alive can say that they're descendant from someone who came here in a canoe and were led here by an astronomer. Okay? So astronomy is the only reason Hawaiians are alive today. Okay? It is the essential thing in Hawaiians. We can dance hula, we can speak whatever, but the thing that makes you a Hawaiian is that your parents or some back generation of your ancestry came here in a canoe, and that canoe was led here by an astronomer. Okay? That's a powerful thing. That's a very powerful unifying thing for a group of people. I don't know of any other groups that can do that, can say that, because we're so isolated. It makes us truly a very special group. In old Hawaii, we had professionals, just like the crazy guys nowadays who take 22 years of their life after high school to become a PhD, and they were called kahuna. Okay? Kahuna is often misrepresented as being a priest. Well, because Hawaiians were really spiritual people. I mean, you get up in the morning, you say a prayer to the day, you know, you go eat, you say a prayer before you say hi to your mom, whatever. But very spiritual people. So it's no wonder that all of our professions were called kahuna. Okay? And in fact, all of the lawyers, doctors, surgeons, they were all called kahuna in the 1800s. One of them very important ones is the kahuna ho'okele, the guy who led the canoe, right? He knew astronomy. He also knew a lot of other science that helped him to find an island. You can find sort of where you are in latitude easy. It's the longitude that's tough. But that's where the other kinds of science, you know, waveforms, birds, coconuts, things like that, to try to find your way once you're near. So here's a couple other. Just kahuna, you know, there's the agricultural, caretaker, dentist, fish maker, and then these guys are the three names that are usually associated with astronomers. Okay, they're, in fact, I'd probably say that the kilo is the astrologer, and the other guys are more the scientific astronomers. But so we, back in old Hawaiian society, not only was the whole reason that we're here due to astronomy, but there were actually astronomers too. Okay. There were also just the general person on the street. If you go and ask just the guy off the street nowadays some of these questions about astronomy, they won't know what you're talking about. But I guarantee if you asked a Hawaiian this, they would know the answers. Okay? Not a modern Hawaiian, because we've also become a part of the modern civilization where we've lost our connection to the skies. But for example, almost all of Kapo'e Kahiko, that means the people of old, they almost all knew about astronomy and the different objects in the sky. They almost all knew about rising and setting, and they used that knowledge to describe a calendar system, okay, calendrics. They also were successful of navigation, of course, because we wouldn't be here if they weren't. Right? They could easily distinguish between planets and stars. How many of you can pick a planet out versus a star? I guarantee you all can pick planets out versus stars. Okay? And I'll show you why. Here, all the planets were named by positions independent of their position in the sky. And here's the test for you. Now I want you to watch the next slide. Pick out the planets. Right. They're right there, right? You can't miss them. Of course, it doesn't hurt that I put up the names next to them, right? But let me just show you. This is take away the names. Now, this is a picture of the sky 1 week. Then a week later, this is what the sky looked like. Now, did you notice anything? Let me blink it for you. Okay? Every single thing in here that's moving compared to the background pattern of stars is a planet. So you all could do this. You just have to look at the sky carefully. Okay? You have to observe the sky carefully. And Hawaiians are great observers, great natural scientists. Okay? So we knew where the planets were. Okay? Also, there's another little detail that many of you may not remember, but when I was a little kid, didn't you guys say, "Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight, I wish I may, I wish I might, give me that Porsche tonight"? I used to do that all the time. Never got a Porsche. What's the problem, right? That's because if you look at these things, they're all planets. The brightest things in the skies are planets. Chances are when you do this wish, you're wishing on a planet. And the star fairies will not pay off. Okay? So get it straight, and you might get the Porsche. So anyway, here's some of the names of the planets. Ho'omananalo, that means the one that follows Mananalo. This is Jupiter, and Mananalo is another name for Venus. Hoku'ula, that's the red star. Ula Ula is red, so that means it's Mars. Then Makulu, I never could understand why this works, but Makulu means dripping, like festering, like a sore. That's Saturn. And the nearest I can tell is that it actually changes its appearance, whether it's rings or face on or edge on. But I don't know. And then there's Hokuloa, the bright big star. What do you think that one is? Venus, right? Venus is the biggest, brightest thing out there. And then there's Ukaliali'i, the one that follows the king, where the king is the center of the solar system or the sun, so that's Mercury, the one that's never found to be very far from the sun. Okay, all of the people of old knew this. They all knew about stars rising in the east and setting in the west. They were familiar with the star patterns. They often probably had names for stars. They had stories about this. Oh, that's Uncle George. And there's Auntie Velma. They're really pissed at each other. That's why they're so far apart. You know, that kind of stuff. I mean, sure, there must have been a gazillion stories. Why? Because, well, what do you do at night? You're not going to be watching Jay Leno. You're going to sit out and watch the sky. So, of course, it was a natural attraction. Now, unfortunately, only a few hundred star names have been saved from those times, and most we don't know what they mean or where they're what star they point to, and that has to do with a real tragedy in Hawaii, and that, of course, we can trace it back to when Captain Cook came. Okay, now he came to Hawaii. He first made a couple great things in his log. He said, those Hawaiians, they seem to be cheerful. They're all tall and smiley. And he noted that they had good teeth and good dental hygiene and stuff. They weren't chewing on candy bars and stuff. And but he underestimated that there were about 400,000 Kanaka Maoli, native Hawaiians, in the islands. And why did I say he underestimated? Well, because he did the typical chicken thing of going down the lee shore of every island rather than the windward side, because we all know that if he went on the windward side, his boats would have gotten smashed and stuff. So he went on the lee shore and made estimates based on the populations he saw on the lee shore. Now, we know about the Ahupua'a concept, and we know that that's clearly only about a third of the people actually who are on the Hawaiian Islands, because there's people who live all the way up into the valley, up do the lumber work. Then there's planters in the lower elevations and so forth. So maybe he was off by a factor of 3. Okay. Also, he only went down one side. So let's assume there were 1 million guys total when he first got to Hawaii. Unfortunately, he didn't mean this, but he brought with him some diseases that Hawaiians couldn't handle, okay, that we had no natural resistance to. So by the 1823 census, that million went down to about 100,000. That means 9 out of 10 people died, right? And by 1853, that was 70,000. Okay, and it doesn't stop yet. 1881, it was 50,000 out of 1 million. And finally, by the end of the Hawaiian Kingdom times, there were only 4% of the Hawaiians who were alive, or those families that were alive at the time that Cook first came. Okay, and they didn't mean to bring measles and mumps. The Europeans had conquered those a long time ago, but Hawaiians had no natural germs to fight those off with. So 4%. This is not only a huge loss in human numbers, but it's also a huge loss in information. Okay, remember I told you so few star names have still been around. That's because you can think of this as 1 in 20, right? Or 1 in 25, even worse. That means that 1 in 25 bits of knowledge survive, and 24 bits of knowledge get killed off with the families that were the ones who carried that knowledge. Okay? Whole industries must have just been wiped out because the grandparents died, or the parents couldn't have children because of venereal diseases, which is another one of these great gifts of the Europeans. There was no way for information to be passed. So it's no wonder that we know almost nothing. The Hawaiian society that we see today is 1 in 20. Okay, you ever want to know why there's people fighting and saying, oh no, it's not done that way, it's done this way? 1 in 20, okay, is all that survive. Okay, I'll never get through this whole talk. We'll just keep going. Anyway, so Hawaiian's concept of time, law of the sun. Okay, it turns out that the day started at noon, not in the morning, but at noon. Okay, and we didn't say, oh, what a great Friday this is. Did you have a great Friday? No, we say, what a great Friday night this was. Did you have a great Friday night? So tonight, I guess I don't really know the phase of the moon. It's probably near full, so we'll say it's po'akua. Okay, so I would say, oh, what a great po'akua. And everybody would know, okay, that means it's the night where the moon is pretty full, almost completely full. Hawaiian natural time, we didn't have seconds, minutes, hours, and that stuff. No, it was all based on, again, what you do. Okay, and in fact, Hawaiian time was based on work. Again, fat, lazy Hawaiians? No way. Look at this chart. Kakahiaka, already daylight, cool enough to go to work. Avakeo, sun is approximately overhead, so go inside to work. Awinala, mid-afternoon, evening, cool enough to go back outside and work. Okay. Finally, ahi-ahi, too dark to see, to work. This tells you that they spend a lot of time working, right? Not fat, lazy, working. Okay. And this is kind of made much more sense than daylight savings and all that. So you can see how much trouble we have to go to get back to these very simple concepts. Mahina, the moon. Turns out the moon, its phases dictated everything in Hawaiian society. There were rules about every single day, every phase of the moon. Okay, so the moon is about 29 and a half days long, the cycle, and Hawaiian said it was 30 days, about 3 10-day weeks. Okay, 3 weeks. What do we do with our weeks? Well, we got 7 days, right? They're named after the 7 visible moving things in the sky, in case you don't know that, right? The 5 planets you can see with your naked eye, and the sun and the moon. Sunday and Monday, right? Okay, and then all the other planets. Do you know that? See, if you didn't know that, Hawaiians would know that, right? They would know about the astronomy connection. So the 3 10-day weeks are, the first one is Ho'onui, that's the growing to fullness. Starts off with the first night of the moon is Hilo, okay? And here's just some of the things that you can do on Hilo or that you can't do on Hilo. It's the first day of the kapu to the god Ku, okay? You had to know this. Why? Because if you mess up in Hawaiian society, What are they going to do? Come and take away your dog? No, they're going to come and, right? Hawaiians, we were very tough. You made a mistake, you were put to death. Okay? And why? Because we're a canoe society. If you make a mistake on a canoe, you not only endanger yourself, you endanger the whole canoe. Okay, an island is sort of like that. You don't do your job, you could threaten a lot more people than just yourself. So it was very draconian, but thank goodness we don't live back then. And do you believe there are people who would like to see a return to the old ways? I don't know about that. So anyway, here's every single night or every single day, night, had a series of chants, and here's what the translation is. It tells you that you can plant certain things, you can't plant certain things. You have to do certain things, and certain gods are in favor, certain gods are not in favor. You make a mistake, you're put to death. So do you believe that every Hawaiian on the street knew these rules? Of course they did. If not, they didn't live long. Okay? So astronomy was an integral part. Not only was it kind of the defining portion of being Hawaiian, it was an important integral part of being Hawaiian. Okay, so anyway, here's a bunch of ho'onui, growing to fullness, all the different Hawaiian names, and of course every single phase of the moon has a story attached to it, and this one in particular I like, Akua, because it's the first of the night marchers nights. Okay, so everybody knew about the night marchers, right? We knew when it was coming up. Turns out on Akua. So then there's a bunch of other nights, and of course the final, or Emi, the decreasing phases of the moon. You get to another night marchers night, and that's night marchers 2. By the way, these are one sheets of films that these guys did with handycams, and they did it like the Blair Witch Project. You know. So I've never seen them, but they're supposed to be like really cheesy. Anyway, so I took it a step further and said that, you know, when you go to the Hawaii Visitor Bureau website, you're met with something like this. But I really think that, you know, in the same spirit as when they warn you about rattlesnakes in New Mexico, that they should do this. They should tell you that on these nights, don't go wandering around, because if you do, you're going to have to take off all your clothes and lay down on the ground and pray to your ancestors that they don't come and get you. Anyway, okay. All right. The months in Hawaiian are based on the phases of the moon, but also they timed them so that there were certain male and female stars, always a duality, that were arising at about the same time in the year. So while it was tied to the phases of the moon, the months were also kind of tied to the yearly cycle of stars. Okay. The Hawaiian year began with the rise of the Pleiades in the east as the sun was setting in the west, and that happens around November-ish. And that titled the beginning of Makahiki, which was the party festival. You could imagine there were a bunch of people saying, "Oh, I don't know what year it is. Oh my God," you know, being completely nervous. So what do? Well, hand them some booze or something, you know, have a party, and they'll forget about it, right? They won't be so uptight about it. And here's the Pleiades. You know it by another name. You may not know this outhand, but it's also called, what's it called? SUBARU. Okay, SUBARU is the Japanese name for this little cluster of stars. They are singular. It's no wonder that everybody notices them. There's like over 100 names for them on the continent of Australia through all of the different indigenous groups. It's because you can look over the whole sky. It's the only cluster of these 10 to 14 really bright stars all sort of clumped together. Just a beautiful thing. If you've never taken the time to look at it, it's really singular. Okay. Okay, how about first astronomy observatories in Hawaii? There is some hint that there were actual observatories, places where astronomy was taught. Okay, like for example on Oahu. Go to Kukaniloko, the birthing stone place. By the way, all these stones are not separate little rocks that were stuck there. They're all part of the big ground rock, and dirt has filled in between the peaks and the valleys. So if you dig down between these two rocks, you'll hit another rock that actually connects them. Okay, but there is one rock that's different from all the rest in Kukaniloko, and that's this one right here. Okay, and I'll show you it up close. You notice it has a petroglyph on it. It's also the only stone on the whole plot that has a petroglyph on it, and that petroglyph is, I'll draw it in color. Looks like this, and that was, by the way, the background of the pamphlet for this talk. And this is what that rock looks like when the sun is setting on the solstice. Okay? So this is exactly the Hawaiian equivalent of the sun dagger, right? In Butte, in the Pueblo Bonita, Chaco Canyon. Okay, same thing, except we didn't use light, we used shadows. Shadows in Hawaiian are much more powerful than light. Okay, shadows are real tough things. All right, so it turns out I know of 2 other sites on the Big Island as well, and I have been there. And I also know that there's reported sites on Maui. I just have never gotten the chance to go out and look and actually, see if it's true. Molokai, Kaho'olawe, Kauai, every island seems to have places where astronomy was taught and or navigation was shown. So where's the first modern solar observatory? Modern solar observatory. Haleakala? Who votes for Haleakala? Don't be afraid. Come on. You're wrong. No. It's Makapu'u. Okay? Makapu'u Solar Observatory. If you ever get a chance to go there now, you can go out here to the what's that called? The light spinning around. Lighthouse. There you go. Senior moment. I was born when Hawaii was a territory. But if you follow the path up, you'll find these blocks of concrete that are the leftover remnants of the old Makapu'u Solar Observatory. Okay. In fact, from the use of that observatory, that's when they started talking about using Haleakala as a great solar site. Haleakala is just a fantastic solar site, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So European astronomy involved things like the College Observatory in Ocean View, Kaimuki. Anybody ever seen this? It's gone. Termites got it a long time ago. But it's up there on that hill, where there's the fake sort of tree and the cell phone repeater satellite thing is there. There's the Hawaiian Astronomical Society. Was founded in 1956 was when the Mies Solar Observatory started up on Haleakala. But the Makapu'u one was where they tested the concepts for it. Okay, and in fact, and then in 1960, talking about astronomy, and we're going to connect now to modern Hawaiian astronomers. In 60, Hilo Bay was wiped out by a big tsunami. Okay, and thanks to that tsunami, Mitz Akiyama, who was then the Chamber of Commerce secretary or something, executive secretary, sent out letters to all of these observatories all over the world and said, "Oh, we need to get some kind of, influx of money and business back into Hilo because Hilo was going to die otherwise." And so he sent out these letters to all of these observatories, and none of them followed through, with the exception of one, Kuiper at the University of Arizona. Okay, he was interested. Everybody else thought it was crazy because, and in fact in Europe, our previous director tells me the story about how when he was a young guy, he's a little bit older than me, but this came through and people said, "Oh, those crazy Americans, they can never build it up there. It'll never work." By the way, once the UH 88-inch telescope was built, it was the best telescope on Earth immediately. Okay, bar none, and that's just because of the altitude. But anyway, Kuiper was interested, and largely because he had a site tester named Alika Herring. Ooh, Alika. Sounds like some kind of name I'd know about, right? Alika. Is a part Hawaiian guy. Okay. And Alika Kamalani Okeakaha Herring, okay, that was his name, was born in 1913. That's his real name, right? I mean, nobody back in 1913 actually used a Hawaiian name unless they were Hawaiian. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, you can run into a Malia who's like pure Japanese, but because it's kind of in vogue, but back then it definitely wasn't in vogue. His father was a missionary named Jesse Herring, and his mom was Liliana Kahanu, a Hawaiian girl. Okay, he was a steel guitar player. He was a professional steel guitar player. I've tried searching the web to get some music samples of his work, but I have yet to do it. I haven't contacted his family yet to see if I can get some from him. But he must have been a fantastic steel guitar player. He was an artist, so he drew this. This is from his observations of the moon's surface. There's, in fact, I think, a crater named Alika on the moon's surface now, named after him. Okay. He did sight testing all over the world with a telescope made with a mirror that he himself polished, and he worked for a place called Cave Optical later in life. And those telescopes are like sought by people all over the world. I would pay a lot to get one of his telescopes because the mirrors are, the figure, etc., are so good. And Kuiper hired him to work at the Lunar Planetary Lab in the 60s. Okay. So he went around and did all this testing, and while he was on Maui, assessing the value of Haleakala as a site, that's when everybody kind of looked over and saw, oh, look at Mauna Kea. And often, this is Mauna Kea in the distance, here's Haleakala. You see these clouds here, these little tufts coming up? Turns out that within 30 minutes, this entire cover, the entire top of Haleakala will be covered by these clouds. But you can still look across and see Mauna Kea sticking up above the clouds. Okay, so there was a lot of reason, and people, and he himself knew that the site of Haleakala was good, so maybe Mauna Kea was even better. So very quickly in '64, following this, trying to get him to come and bring stuff there, they set up a site testing telescope, which was Alika Herring's telescope that he took all over the world to do site testing. And he found that Haleakala had slightly better seeing, but that Mauna Kea was better because it was above the inversion layer, so it got better weather more often during the year. Okay. Now, for those of you who don't know what seeing is, imagine you're going to paint a picture of something. This is actually a picture of a guy. Okay? But you notice my paintbrush, I can only make dots that are about this size. If the seeing is bad, then the dots that you can use when you paint the picture are big. Okay? But I can, suppose I go to a place that's got better seeing, like Haleakala or Mauna Kea, then the dot size becomes smaller. Okay? And I can start to see more detail. Okay, more resolution. So we look for the best seeing possible because we want to see that, oh my God, it's my boss. Right? This is what seeing is. So the smaller the number, if you say 1 arc-second seeing, that means you can take a really good detailed picture. Okay? 3 arc-second, kind of the big dots. Okay? And like I say, he found that Haleakala had slightly better seeing. But the problem was, of course, that Haleakala gets covered over by clouds a lot more often than Mauna Kea. Mauna Kea does get covered by clouds. I know because I've been observing when it happens. And it's not fun. But that's the only reason why this development or big telescopes are on Mauna Kea rather than Haleakala. Okay. And I would like to point out that if it weren't for these investigations by a Hawaiian astronomer, we might not even have telescopes at all, okay? Because he was the one who convinced Kuiper that, in fact, this was a jewel in terms of its place for observing. Okay, here's the Mauna Kea station. This is probably taken by Herring. And here's Alika Herring right there, freezing to death up on the summit of Mauna Kea. But I hope that I've shown you that Hawaiians and astronomy are so integrally connected that to say one exists without the other, or to say that, we should get rid of astronomy, that really, to me, as a Hawaiian, strikes at my core. It's like getting rid of the thing that defines me. Okay? Now, many Hawaiians don't feel that way, but, I've thought about it logically, and it's the only thing that connects us all. The only thing that makes us stand out from all the other Polynesians that are out there. So this is what Mauna Kea looks like today. There are people who would like to see it look like this, right? I hope you understand this. To me, as a Hawaiian and as an astronomer, it's an affront to my senses. It's crazy, But then again, so is this, And you say, oh, wow, that's like a telescope everywhere, right? Oh, no, my gosh. But you may think, oh, how could you do this? Well, Photoshop. But the point is, this is the same number of telescopes that are on Kitt Peak. So it's already been done, right? we are crazy as astronomers too, and we would do something stupid like this. And I say stupid because this is a fantastic mountain, fantastic mountains, and we should only put the best on them. Okay? We should only use them for the best. So I'm really happy that as a member of the Institute for Astronomy that the current long-range plan is this. And this is the less telescopes on Mauna Kea than are currently there now. Of course, I neglect to mention that this is a real big one back over there, right? That's the 30-meter telescope. And it's off the summit just because it's so big, it would like be incredibly crazy on the summit. But it turns out that off the summit, back on this plateau, is also quite good seeing. Okay, so we can paint very detailed pictures with it as well. And I would love to say that this is the vision I have for our mountains in the future, that where we're using them for, you know, this great endeavor or whatever, and we are not abusing them in that way. And I think I hope I've shown that it in fact is in keeping with the whole Hawaiian astronomer thing. So that's it for today. Thank you. Now you have to tell me which jokes worked and which didn't work. You have any questions? I'd be glad to. Yes.
I learned a lot, but I'm kind of interested. Why does Haleakala have better seeing than Mauna Kea?
It's oh yeah. The question is, why does Haleakala have better seeing than Mauna Kea? Okay. I don't know. Nobody really knows, but it has to do with probably the way in which the prevailing winds fly over the mountain. Okay. Haleakala is also a fantastically great solar site. You can tell this by, there's a simple test. What you do is you put your thumb up and cover up the sun. When you're up on Haleakala, you can see blue right up to your thumb. Okay? If you do that here down at sea level, you will see leftover haze from the sun around your finger. And in fact, you go up to Mauna Kea, you'll see haze around your finger from the sun. But it's the fact that there's so few atmospheric impurities above Haleakala that makes it a perfect solar site. Okay? But also, I think it's the reason why it's such a great, besides the lack of impurities, it's also such a fantastic laminar flow of material over the mountain. You know, I look at, as a Hawaiian, I look at this as a gift of our ancestors, and my ancestors, I mean the mountains, the island, that they made the volcanoes be shield volcanoes. They weren't these, you know, peaky Mount St. Helens explode all over the place volcanoes, right? They're these shields. So flow of air from the surrounding water, which is all kept at a fairly same temperature, just flows nice and smoothly over the tops of our mountains. And that's why the seeing is so good. But it's just slight differences in the way in which the air hits the mountain that makes Haleakala better than Mauna Kea. But they're both very good, excellent sites for observing. Yes.
The slide of the shadow on the stone went by so quickly. What does it show when it's at the right astronomical position?
Okay, so he asked the slide that shows the shadows on the Kukaniloko stone. The shadows are due to those ridges on the side of the rock. Those ridges were actually carved out, okay, with stone tools. Okay, so they made these ridges, carved them out, so that when the sun set on the solstice, summer solstice, that was the summer solstice. Yeah, summer solstice, not equinox. On the summer solstice, when the sun set on that summer solstice, the shadow of those carved peaks made a cup around the petroglyph, so that you could actually just look at the shadow and say whether or not it was actually the solstice time. And if it was solstice time, then you knew the next day the sun would rise a little bit further to the south. Yeah. So just in the same way that the sun dagger marked exactly the same solstice period, where the sun was able to get through the rocks and mark off that petroglyph. It's the same kind of thing. Okay. Yes?
Paul, you showed a lunar crater map, and it was spelled differently than La Perouse here, but is that La Perouse?
Yes.
And so it was named by Alika, so there's a crater named La Perouse on the moon?
I think it is, but actually that figure was a reprint of someone's article in an old Sky and Telescope magazine, and he mentioned that he added names to it. So I'm not sure whether it was Alika's naming or the guy who.
La Perouse on the moon.
Yeah. Yes again. Oh, yes again.
Where did you get all this information? Because it looked like it took a lot of work and a lot of time.
Nah, I was just a little reading one morning. No, no. Ever since oh, sorry. Yeah, the question was, where did I get all this information? It looked like a lot of work and time. And I do actually have a slide which gives credit or blame, well, credit, to the people who. Let me see if, in fact, I didn't delete it. I think I deleted it. But no, ever since I came back, I mean, as was noted in the introduction, I traveled all over the world, but what wasn't noted was that at every stop I applied for a job back home in Hawaii, right? I got my PhD. Oh, I'm Dr. Coleman, I'm an astrophysicist. Let's get a job back home in Hawaii. No, not good enough. So every single job in those jumping around things, I would apply back. Never get it, never get it. And I kept getting better and better at what I did, but when I finally did get home to Hawaii, I made it a point of trying to read everything I could about Hawaiian astronomy, the old ways, as much information as I could possibly get. So this is kind of a cramming together of basically 11 years of study. So, plus a couple crazy nights of just figuring out some silly jokes to do with PowerPoint. Yes?
You know the Hawaiians had a different belief about eclipses, like what they thought about, like solar eclipses?
Yeah, I don't really know what. Oh, sorry. She asked if I believe that that Hawaiians had a different perspective or thoughts about eclipses and what their thoughts were. I don't really know. And we, like I said, 1 in 20, right? Maybe there was some reasonable explanation in their minds, but we don't know it. Just don't know it. Yes?
What kind of projects do you work on as an astronomer?
What kind of projects do I work on as an astronomer? Well, here's the real boring part. Now, I'm kind of interested in fractal processes. Now, fractals are examples of really complicated things, but they're complicated in a very orderly way. So you can actually describe them really nicely, but they're still very complicated. They look like, oh my gosh, how could it possibly get anything out of it? But these prescriptions that were developed by Benoit Mandelbrot, who was the father of fractal astronomy, I've just taken sort of that framework and applied it to a lot of astronomy. So I'm kind of interested in the large-scale structure of the universe. By the way, it doesn't appear to be homogeneous. In fact, it appears to be fractal out to the extents that we can measure. There's no reason to believe that it'll continue for as far as, for as large as the universe is. But at least right now, in today's world, you ask, how far does the fractal structure of the universe extend? I'll say until we can't see anymore. Okay, that may change in the near future. But that's the kind of stuff I work on.
So when you're observing, when you're looking through a lot of computer screens, looking through a telescope, that's what you're looking for?
Well, a lot of times I started this by doing work on active galactic nuclei because they're really bright things. And so if you want to look at the way in which the curves and valleys of the universe develop, then you want to have really bright things out there to look for the curves and valleys. So I spent a lot of time doing observations of active galactic nuclei, quasars. My thesis advisor was the discoverer of quasars. Now you may say, Schmidt, and I'll say, no, it was Cyril Hazard, and that's a whole nother story. But so that's the kind of stuff I do. I'm really interested in applying these nonlinear phenomena, nonlinear mathematical structures to what we see, because clearly lots of the stuff we see falls in that regime. Yes?
On that petroglyph picture you showed, there are several scallops on the rock that surround it with places, when the sun came through those openings, were there any significant dates associated with that?
So he's asked that on the petroglyph picture, there's a lot of these scalloped rocks, and perhaps I can't go out there all the time, but and you need to see whether or not the shadows correspond to different parts of the year, and it could well be. I mean, I only picked the solstice because it turned out that, and I don't have a picture of it, but Ruby Cavena Johnson, who is one of the first ones who noticed this, she just happened to be there near the solstice time and got a day where the shadow cast on that petroglyph, and it did this. Now since then I've tried to go out for every solstice and equinox to see if in fact one of those other dips and valleys correspond to those times a year. But I've never, every time I've gone out for the winter solstice, it's been cloudy. So I mean, I got to live out there, you know. Maybe if I pitch a tent, or tried to think of some way to set a camera there always to take pictures of it all the time. But yeah, it seems like a project for a good, smart high school person. Yes.
When dealing with fractals, do you ever have in astronomy? Do you ever have sort of a cosine paradox?
Cosine paradox? I'm not sure. What does that mean?
Coastline paradox.
Oh, coastline paradox. Of course. That he asked me if, in dealing with fractal astronomy, do I ever see the coastline paradox or things like that? Well, what he's talking about is that if you try to measure the coastline of, for example, Maui, you will get a different value depending on the size of the ruler you use, right? Now, if you think about a geometric structure like a circle, right, a plane geometry circle, you will always get the same answer with the circle. But with a fractal structure that's got all these bumps and wiggles, if you make your ruler small enough, you'll have to follow all the bumps and wriggles. And that's what makes coastlines, which are examples of erosion due to nonlinear processes, that's what makes them fractals. And this was one of the first examples that Mandelbrot pointed out, was that the coastline of Britain was a fractal. Okay. And yes, we do. If we do the same sort of thing with hydrogen clouds in nearby galaxies, you find out the same perimeter to area tests that you could use on islands. Actually shows you fractal structure in those clouds. Yes?
Well, it seems that the ancient Hawaiians were doing what would be called...
Old Hawaiians. Oh, okay. Okay, you're talking about the 1,000 years ago. Okay.
They were doing what would be called in anthropology cognitive mapping astronomy. That they were taking the entire 3D map of the sky and having it within their cognitive faculty, so they knew exactly what was coming up in the whole map of the sky, which is what modern amateur astronomy is.
Yeah, it's true. And it was so much more sorry, I can't repeat that question. But it's what we're talking about, this usage of a greater understanding of the overall, of the three-dimensional structure of the universe, say. It's just something that comes from years and years of observation. You know, if we weren't watching David Letterman every night, you know, we could be out learning these things, right? Our ancestors did, right? We just have gotten so lazy with our couches and stuff that we don't really see the sky as much. Yes?
That technique of navigation is still alive and well today out in the South Pacific. I spent about a year sailing through the Pacific and went to places like Satawal, Uluwat, and Lamatrek. And the old, not the old guys, just the regular guys will easily take their canoe from one island to the other, and it'll be a 2 or 3 day sail. And they don't have any compass. It's all done by the waves and the stars.
It's actually true that the old techniques of, which is what you're saying, that the old techniques of navigating are still being used in the South Pacific. In fact, that's how our modern traditional navigators in Hawaii learned was by people by Maui, for example, who use those techniques. But in the first days when Cook came to the islands, he actually took a navigator on board, had him sit down below the deck, and they went all over the place. The navigator came out and said exactly where they were and how they had to go. And there's a story about Mao going to sleep, saying, okay, now just follow this wave pattern, make sure it hits the bow of our boat like this all the time, and then when the sun sets, we'll be able to sight from the stars again. He went downstairs, went to sleep for 2 hours, woke up, came back upstairs, and made them make an adjustment because he felt the waves hitting the boat at a different angle than what they should have been. See, all of this is knowledge that we can get. We all have muscle memory, but we've forgotten how to train ourselves. But he knew it, and so our modern navigators, they try to get in tune with that same kind of muscle memory, that same kind of magic. Yeah, there's no TV on the boat. If you're lucky, there's a guitar. Yes, outside, sorry.
Thank you. I look at the stars and I try to imagine where they might be in relation to each other in 3D because, it's easy to think of it as a flat 2D surface. Are there any models or diagrams or anything that kind of shows maybe what the geometries might be if we drew lines connecting stars based on where they are in relation to each other?
So she's asked if there are any models that show what the star's actual positions on the sky look like. I mean, what we see is something that looks like a giant bowl with little dots of light. And what she's asking is it possible to see models where the stars are actually in 3D perspectives? And yes, in fact, if you get a chance to ever go to the Imiloa Center and look at their planetarium on Big Island, it's a three-dimensional planetarium. So they actually plot the stars out in their three-dimensional locations. There's also, I'm sure there's some stereograms where you have to either cross your eyes or get the special glasses, but there are plots of star fields that are in 3 dimensions. I don't know if Hawaiians believe that they were three-dimensionally spread on the sky or if they were on a bowl. But again, 1 in 20, right? So. Yes? For stars in our neighborhood. Yeah, did you hear that? Oh yeah, I enjoy looking at the time lapse of these things. Like, for example, we happen to be living in a time when we were kind of lucky to have the North Star, Hokupa'a, the fixed star in the heavens, be where it is. Because, in another 10,000 years or so, it's going to be a little bit further away. Maybe Hawaiians wouldn't have developed quite such an accurate navigation system if they didn't have that star to point to. Yes?
Do you have any idea what the astronomers used when they crossed the equator? What they were using for latitude in the southern hemisphere?
He asked if I knew anything about what the navigators used when they went to the southern hemisphere and they couldn't see the Hokupa'a, the fixed star in the north. It turns out that, of course, there is a point where the sky rotates around that point, and what they used was the Southern Cross. The Southern Cross actually points to the axis of rotation in the sky. So that became the marker for southern latitude astronomy. They would look at where the Southern Cross was.
I'm not familiar with that. Is it a coal sack?
Yeah, that's one of the.
Tell that. Is it just a dark opening, or?
It just looks. It's just a in the southern sky. The sky is much nicer. It's like a giant fireworks display. But yeah, the coal sack is just one part of the cross. It's just a section. I think it's below, as you point towards the South Pole. But Kalepa Baibayan has told me that that's what they do. They look for the Southern Cross. And even if they can't see the whole cross, if they can see 2 of the stars, then they know where they are. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Did the Hawaiians have names for some of the southern constellations, like the Southern Cross?
Yes. Did the Hawaiians have names for the constellations like the Southern Cross? And the answer is yes. And I got rid of that slide, but on the slide I showed the 30 or so names of things that we think we know what they are out of the, a good 5,000 things that you can see with your naked eye. We only have 30 left, right? 1 in 20, right? All of that knowledge gone. And so they did, in fact, have names. And one of the names that we associate with the Southern Cross is probably wrong. Okay, it was probably a misidentification by I guess it's a whole other story I could tell you about, but there are several different names for the Southern Cross. But the one that people are using now is probably wrong. Hanaya Kamalama or something like that. It means cared for by the moon, and so we have a hard time understanding how that means the Southern Cross. And I think I know why it was incorrectly identified. But anyway, any other questions? Yes.
In your observations, what is some of the most fascinating things you've seen out there?
Oh well, my own particular observations. Well, this wasn't really an observation. It was kind of like doing a data reduction and then looking at the answer. But for a brief moment in there were two human beings in the whole world who understood that the universe was a multifractal. I was just a grad student, or I just finished my graduate work. I was doing a postdoc, and I was in Italy in an office with another scientist, and we had just completed this calculation, and we both just looked at each other and we couldn't believe it, because for that instant in time we were the only two human beings who knew this answer. Since then we've published the paper and lots of people have yelled at us, but for just that instant it was like we had discovered, we had discovered this fantastic thing, and no one else knew about it. No one in the whole world knew about it. I mean, that, to me, I hope every one of you gets an experience like that, especially you young guys, to find something and then realize, holy smokes, I'm the only person in the world who knows this. So, shall I keep it to myself? Also, in fact, I found a couple quasars, but it's unfortunate because if you live long enough, then now there's naming conventions for quasars, so they couldn't call it Paul 1 and Paul 2. They have to call it by the IAU, the standard naming conventions. So I kind of missed out on that. If I'd have found a couple comets or something, you can still name comets, but things like quasars and galaxies, you're kind of stuck with the naming conventions. Yes.
Is there any grants to restore these Hawaiian names and what's lost, but at least trying to rebuild some of it and add to the 30 names on the labs for the new Hawaiian Emerging School classes and the next generation?
It's called My Salary. He asked if there's any grants or proposals to try to restore all of these lost names, and really I think they're going to be lost forever. Now what we try to do is perhaps we could rename them. I mean, the Polynesian Voyaging Society has done that in several of their star lines, which map out how to get from the South Pacific to Hawaii during different parts of the year. They've just inserted new names. They've put in new legends. They're not strictly the traditional ones, but they have stories to them, and they're part of us, the growing population of people. So I think I'll continue to look for historical hints, and I've even gone into the bowels of the Bishop Museum libraries and things like that. But my Hawaiian's not good enough yet. But yeah, we'll continue to keep looking for it. But there is no real grant to do this. Yes.
Can you touch a little bit on about what a multifractal, or like the universe being a multifractal is, and for the significance of that? Or?
Okay, I'll give you the quick tour. Okay, the quick tour is this: if you talk about a fractal, okay, so you got a point here and a point over here that's correlated with it, or shouldn't really be there. If you just throw a bunch of dust up in the air, it would end up in this really sort of uniformly spread out pattern. But if you threw it up in a fractal way, then it would kind of be that the dust over here knew about this dust over here, and there would be clumping and structure. Okay, so there'd be lots of clumps over here and clumps here, and clumps of all kinds of different sizes. Okay. That's strictly a fractal thing. So the locations of the clumps are what we call fractally distributed. But now a multifractal means not only do you have the locations all being in this very special weird thing, but mathematically prescribed, right? So not just thrown any old place, but it has to be in a very special way. And what's really cool is these special ways happen all the time. Like nature just forces them to happen, okay? Why? You know, but anyway, so you got all these points specially located, and now you go and you look at what's at each point, and there's mass, there's material. And the material is distributed in another one of those special ways.
Are they correlated?
Yeah. And so not only do you have the positions of everything being very, very special, but also the amount of stuff that's at those positions is very special. That's a multifractal. Okay? It comes in very handy when you're talking about gravitational collapse. How you make, not lensing, but how you make galaxies, how you make stars. Okay, all of those things come kind of naturally from this very, very nonlinear process. Oh, I wish I could do research again. Yes?
Would you be willing to come back and give another lecture on this?
Never, no way could I ever do this. I hate this place. Absolutely, I am always willing. Who does that? What comedian does that, right? Yes.
In your opinion, is it possible that since most of the knowledge with the long ago Hawaiians was all oral tradition, it's gone? It is gone. With so many families dying.
He's pointed out that with the fact that the oral traditions and with the dying off of all those, like 1 in 20, they said, is it gone for good? Fortunately, you know, I didn't mention, but as we were dying off, more and more people were actually writing down what we knew about. So, unfortunately, the people who were doing the writing down knew less astronomy than the people who were talking. Okay? So, you can imagine some Hawaiian is saying, oh yeah, that's the star that does this and turns this way during a certain time of year. And the interviewee wrote a star ? So, but there still was quite a bit that was saved. And this is why I say there's now these projects to translate the Hawaiian newspapers and publications that happened during the 1800s. And we might still be able to gather some of those oral traditions that were written down.
And dig inside the books.
And dig inside the layers and of these published articles.
Good luck.
Yeah, it sounds like a life's work, doesn't it? I'm getting too old for this stuff. Remember, I was born during the territory days. Yes.
In early Hawaiian astronomy, when Captain Cook became the first tourist over here, he left on Christmas Island, came up to Hawaii on the north-south passage. I believe he had a Hawaiian navigator with him.
Oh.
I also believe in names of different places on Maui itself, where next to Kahalava, Kealakahiki, which is a pathway to Tahiti.
Yeah, that's right.
And the valley looking north from Kealakahiki is Ukumihami. And in this valley of Ukumihami, there's a navigational site.
Oh.
And
I think I've heard of it, but I've never gone there yet. So.
Okay. In the peak of Ukumihami, there's this mountain that's called Hoku'ula, meaning the red star.
Yeah.
Now in the evening, if you're looking up there towards Hoku'ula, you see the dipper, the big dipper is rotating, and you see the North Star right above Pukalani,
Oh.
which is the northern passage going to Kealakahiki Point, which is the southern star. And if you measure that out on a straight line on Google Earth, you draw a line straight down, it goes to Christmas Island.
Huh.
Okay? And there is remnants of a navigational site there, which is twin walls,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe when the Hawaiians came along that north-south passage, when their canoes were in line with Hokulea, they turned the walls this way, they went east-west,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
okay? And you had 500 miles of islands,
Right,
and that would be Hawaii.
right. In fact, what he's talking about is how there's anecdotal evidence that, in fact, a lot of the names of places here in Hawaii have to do with the discovery and with the path where these Polynesians came, in particular from Tahiti. Anytime you hear Kahiki, you know they're talking about Tahiti. And one of the big details problems with getting from South Pacific to Hawaii is it's real easy to go north. It's easy to get the latitude. But then where do you go on the longitude? And so he mentioned a possible prescription for getting up to the correct latitude and then turning, and the way our modern navigators do it is to turn downwind into the east.
Right,
So
because you're going into the trades, you're
Right.
going on the northern side.
right, and I wish we knew more of this because there just seemed to be so much knowledge there. Imagine when Cook came to the islands, he had compasses and clocks and books to tell him where to go, and then he ran into native navigators who they didn't use any of that stuff, and they were just as accurate as he was. We just lost all.
And if you look into Kumehame, where he's showing to the path of Kealakahiki, where would you leave the Hawaiian Islands? Someplace that said water, taro patches, food,
Yeah,
everything.
that's right.
And you on that north-south line.
Yeah, in fact, see, I have never seen this place here, but Kumakahi on the Big Island, is the same kind of setup, and there is in fact some idea that if you go in a certain direction, that the trades and the normal path of the water will shoot you back down around towards Tahiti. It's just incredible stuff they must have known. Makes you envious, I tell you. Thank you. I should get together with you sometime and talk about Maui, because I've never seen those sites.
Okay.
Did you?
What's your theory on what inspired the ancient ones?
I think everybody's leaving, but well, I had a couple theories. Like there was this theory that my pleasure. There was a theory that we were brought here by space aliens, and I actually argued with a woman for several hours one night until I realized that's what she meant. But